I want to welcome up our special guest naturalist, Cheri Naquin.
Hi. All right. Howdy, y'all. My name is Cheri. I haven't been here in a while. You've learned the trick is to tell me to come at a particular time. All right. Today's message for all ages is called Grandmother Spider. There are a lot of stories about Grandmother Spider. This particular one that you'll actually hear all of is called Grandmother Spider Stole the Sun. It originated in what we now call Oklahoma, amongst the Muskogee Creek peoples. When the earth was first made, there was no light. It was very hard for the animals and the people in the darkness. Finally, the animals decided to do something about it. I have heard there is something called the sun, said the bear. It is kept on the other side of the world, but the people there will not share it. Perhaps we can steal a piece of it. All the animals agreed that it was a good idea, but who would be the one to steal the sun? The fox was the first to try. He sneaked to the place where the sun was kept. He waited until no one was looking. Then he grabbed a piece of it in his mouth and ran. But the sun was so hot, it burned his mouth and he dropped it. To this day, all foxes have black mouths because that first fox burned his carrying the sun. The possum tried next. In those days, Possum had a very bushy tail. She crept up to the place where the sun was kept, broke off a piece, and hid it in her tail. Then she began to run, bringing the sun back to the animals and the people. But the sun was so hot, it burned off all the hair on her beautiful tail, and she lost hold of it. To this day, all possums have bare tails because the sun burned away the hair on that first possum. Then Grandmother Spider tried. Instead of trying to hold the sun herself, she wove a bag out of her webbing. She put the piece of the sun into her bag and carried it back with her. Now the question was where to put the sun. Grandmother Spider told them the sun should be up high in the sky. Then everyone will be able to see it and benefit from its light. All the animals agreed, but none of them could reach up high enough. Even if they carried it to the top of the tallest tree, that would not be high enough for everyone on the earth to see the sun. Then they decided to have one of the birds carry the sun up to the top of the sky. Everyone knew the buzzard could fly the highest, so he was chosen. Buzzard placed the sun on top of his head, where his feathers were the thickest. For the sun was very hot, even inside Grandmother Spider's bag. He began to fly up and up toward the top of the sky. As he flew, the sun grew hotter. Up and up he went, higher and higher, and the sun grew hotter and hotter still. Now the sun was burning through Grandmother Spider's bag, but the buzzard still kept flying up toward the top of the sky. Up and up he went, and the sun grew hotter. Now it was burning away the feathers on top of his head, but he continued on. Now all of his feathers were gone, but he flew higher. Now it was turning the bare skin of his head all red, but he continued to fly. He flew until he reached the top of the sky, and there he placed the sun where it would give light to everyone. The stories go on to say about how Buzzard was honored, and he's allowed to fly higher than any other birds and circles the sun in the sky. The story says that the web that carried the sun was honored by the webs of light coming off of the sun. You'll notice, too, that all of the parts of the animals people consider gross are those that, in fact, we should be grateful for. Amongst Native American peoples, there are a lot of different stories about Grandmother Spider. Amongst another people, it's almost the exact same story, but there's a bear and a coyote instead of a wolf and a coyote. Anyway, Grandmother Spider is around a lot in stories. She weaves life. She does some cool stuff. She teaches patience, right? When a chief is following a deer and runs into a spider web, he becomes angry, but Grandmother Spider teaches him patience. And then when you look further away from the American continent, there are a lot more stories about spiders. Some of them are tricksters. Sometimes they're just Loki, actually. But in a lot of them, they're creating life. They're creating, what you call that interconnected web of all existence, right? And I like this story because I actually spend a lot of time at work talking about spiders. I'm an animal educator, but it's only a small part of my job to actually teach facts. Most of my job is teaching people how to not dislike the animals that they currently dislike. And if you think I'm exaggerating, I'm really not. I can't start talking about anything without hearing people say ew and gross, and I see people start squirming. And so a lot of my job is just teaching them. A part of it is respect and reverence, of course, which can be taught from a scientific standpoint. But a lot of it is love. Like the scientific facts of animals don't make people stop wanting to squish them, or if they're larger, eat them. But stories and names do. Stories and names teach love. I actually have a very personal example. Y'all might remember when this church was overrun with millipedes. Does anybody remember the millipedes falling onto our heads from the roof? I remember it. I was in a meeting here, and I think I must have been the first to notice that the ceiling was wriggling and that the wriggling masses were falling. And with puckish delight, I slowly watched as everybody else in the meeting discovered it. Now, of course, I assumed that we probably killed the millipedes, probably. At the time, I didn't love millipedes. It was a little while later that I asked an educator which animal they were using, and she said, "I'm using Penelope today." And that was an exciting moment for me because I didn't know we had an animal named Penelope at work. So I waited a couple of hours and I saw her pull out a millipede. And I kept expecting her to say its name is Penelope, but she never did. And as she was putting it away, I realized I had made a mistake and that she had not said, "I'm using Penelope today." She had said, "I'm using a millipede today." And that was the moment that I loved millipedes. I had not cared when the thousands of them falling from the church ceiling had been killed. But suddenly I loved them and they were all named Penelope. So the stories and the religious beliefs, that belief that we really have, that there really is an interconnected web between all of us, both I think are necessary when it comes to protecting and loving the animals. In that vein, I brought some animals with names. I brought 2 baby jumping spiders named Peas Blossom and Pug Robin, and I brought 2 large desert millipedes, and I bet you know their names.
Penelope 1.
That's right. 2. If you would like to see them, they're right here, and you can come on down right now.